This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today is my special guest for this live stream shoot interview. We have WWE Hall of Famer year 2015, former NWA star, former IWA Puerto Rico booker. He's booked everywhere, which we'll probably get into. None other than Bushwhacker / sheep herder, Luke Williams. How are you today, sir?
Lovely, Devin. And how are you, folks? G'day to all my fans out there. Whoa!
I think all the fans are good. There's already some fans on here telling you hello. Someone from Minneapolis too. People from all over the place. The one question to start with is, how's your gym doing with this lockdown? You have that wonderful gym in Clearwater, Florida, that I think Hulk Hogan trains at.
Yeah, well, I no longer have that gym. That building now, that gym now is a game center. The sports bar below. The guy who bought the plaza was a young guy from New York, and he wanted to put the plaza in all restaurants and bars. So he put my rent up $5,000 more than I grossed, and it was way out of my means. If I tell you the footage, anyhow, people don't know about footage, and it's not about me. That anyhow, I sold the equipment and the name to my manager, Juan, and he's on South Beach, on the backside of the main drag on South Beach, South Clearwater Beach. And he's running. It's half the size of mine, but he's doing great with tourism. A lot of Canadians, mate, and the rest of the people.
Well, as you know from living here, when you did the Calgary and Montreal territories and Ontario territories, more than half the year the weather is terrible here. So I don't blame the Canadians that go down to Florida.
Yep, the Northeast. Montreal. Quebec, Ontario. We get a lot of people from Quebec, Ontario, and the New England area. Anyhow, that's over now. I'm since August, September last year. I've been a free man, and I was back on the road doing a lot of independent shows and signings, and getting in the squared circle. And now since February. My last booking was in Ontario in the end of February. I haven't been anywhere since then.
I actually saw it on Valentine's Day. Didn't somebody book you for a Q&A in Niagara Falls or something on Valentine's Day?
Yeah, that was that was correct.
Yeah, I was wondering how any guy that has a girlfriend would be able to convince the girl to come see a Bushwhacker Luke Q&A for Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Anyhow, that's I didn't know. I was working in Canada for a wrestling promotion, and I was in their booth selling programming.
Okay.
In a trade show. I spent 2 days. I came up twice, and we were selling shows throughout the Ontario and Quebec.
You have a fan on here, Ryan Brown, that tipped $4.99. Luke and I are actually splitting the tips today. So thank you for the $4.99 tip. He says, greetings from Massachusetts. Met you and Butch years ago. You were both great to me. Thank you. It meant a lot to me as a young kid.
Hey, mate. Appreciate that, mate. Who gave you the head licking? Butch or me?
Yeah, let us know who licked it. Speaking of the head licking, I saw a quote from Kathy Lee, from Regis and Kathy Lee, saying her 2 worst experiences with wrestlers was Rick Rude hitting on her and you and Butch trying to lick her.
Yeah, well, she ran off. We were as you know, Regis Philbin, God rest his soul, he just died a couple of months ago, or a month ago. Anyhow, he loved wrestlers. And he and Vince McMahon were very close. And we were on in, say, 89 or 88. And we were doing the show, joking around with Regis, and she was there. Then we turned around to her. She got up, left. She left. And she put that in a book that we were the the uncouth people she's ever met.
Do you think that licking would work today with how sensitive everybody is?
No, anyhow, Devin, I put my hand over their head and licked the back of my hand. Butch, we finished with WWF in 97. 96 was our last run. We finished with early 97, so that was when it was over. And Butch got really sick too, but I don't know whether it was from that or it was from using that DMSO. In 201, end of 201, he nearly died.
How is he doing now?
Good. He was in hospital in 201, end of 201. He was in hospital for 3 months with a major staph infection. I found him laying on his bed. I rang him up we're doing the we're in Augusta, Georgia, doing the state fair, the Georgia State Fair, and I rang him up. I said, "What time I pick you up in the morning?" He says, "I can't move." So I sent him got my friend to take him to a chiropractor, and I did the show. And on the way home, he never answered the phone. I stopped, went into his home. He was laying in his bed in his own urine and feces, and he couldn't move. The phone was about maybe a foot away from his hand. His whole body had seized up, and they rushed him to hospital and checked him out. And it took him a while to find out it was some form of staph infection, where they had to put him in the IC ward for 11 days. They had to put a pipe down his throat because his lungs were packing up. God bless him. And he was strapped down in the bed, and then he went from 240 to 150.
Oh boy!
Just letting his bowels wouldn't hold anything, and he was just fed for about 3 weeks through tubes. And that, anyhow, cut a long story short, he got out of there. He said to me, "I'm packing up and going home, back to be with my daughters and all that in New Zealand." And lo and behold, this was 203. He got back there, got a job. He goes to the gym every day. The guy at the gym says, "You're here every day. Why don't you run the gym for me?" He's running the gym for him, and blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, 2010, he fell out of bed, and a week went out of his life. He was delirious in hospital, and they come to, and the staff had come back again, and they said it was in his hip. And so they analyzed him and that. And they told him after a period of time, we can take your hip out. So they took out his hip about 211, and he was without a hip for 4 years. They were testing him for staph, and then when they found that he was completely clean, and end of 240, he put a new hip in him, and then at 215 we went in the Hall of Fame.
Ryan Brown tipped $2.99, and he says Butch actually licked his head, so maybe Butch didn't have the same policy as you.
No, Butch was right into it. He gave them a face wash.
I guess our friend Bob Cook is watching too. He says hello.
Bob Cook is a good friend from Florida. He was with me in Florida Championship Wrestling in the early 80s.
And Maria Davis tips you $10. She says, "Hello, Luke. She enjoyed watching you wrestle, and you made wrestling great."
Thank Maria. Is it Maria?
Yes, there's a female. You have a female fan.
Hey, Maria. Now, if I was with you now, I'd put you in a big Bushwacker bear hug. I wouldn't be tied; it'd be loose, but then you would get the good Bushwacker licking. How about that? And I won't tell you, but I'm from down under. Whoa!
I had a question for you as a booker. I know you must be aware of this whole Lars Sullivan stuff that happened with him and all that footage that came out of him being a gay porn star. Do you think they're just going to let him sit out the rest of his contract, or do you think they're actually going to bring him back after all of that?
Who's this?
Lars Sullivan. Have you ever heard of him?
Lars, yeah, I heard of him. Wasn't he with Kevin Sullivan years ago?
No. Okay, you don't know the story. He's a WWE wrestler.
No.
That apparently it came out he was a gay porn star. and he hasn't been on TV since that's come out, but he's still under contract. So I was wondering if you had known the story, if you think they'll actually bring him back or just let him sit out his whole contract. But Kevin Sullivan confirmed there's no relation there.
Yeah, I was talking to Kevin yesterday. Anyhow, this last no, this is my quote. They will rest him till it's forgotten about, and then they will bring him back. If he's a good hand and it's got an exceptional body, they'll bring him back, but they'll rest it till people have forgotten about that situation. Of course, it'll always be brought up when he comes back, but the intensity with it won't be.
Now, when you were with the WWE, was there ever any talk of bringing the sheep herders back after the main Bushwhacker run was starting to die off?
I suggested going back to the heels and that, but Vince often said, "You're over so strong as baby faces, you'll never get over as heels again." You know.
Yeah,
but I've done many situation angles with heels that turn back to baby faces. You know, but not on a major network like WWE was. You know, it was worldwide. And we were loved by grandparents to kids.
Now, you also sold a lot of merchandise. Another fan question was, did you get good royalties off of that? Because everybody had the hats and the shirts back then.
Yes. We did some great royalty quarters then, early in the day. And that, boy, I wish with all the social media today that we were still on television, and boy, we'd have a killing.
This is an unusual question. It must be a Jerry Gray story. Is it true Jake Roberts drank his own piss in front of Jerry?
I was right there, mate. I was on the show with Jake. There was Honky and Jake were working around the territory. Jerry ran a lot of towns. He'd run Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and that's quite often, and once a month, I guess. And this time he missed the show, and he came back, and he arrived at the next show, and he said he said in the dressing room, "I will drink." Hey, he apologized, and he says, "For what I did, I will prove it by drinking my own piss." And that's when Jerry Gray took him out in the hallway and closed the dressing room door. And of course, those dressing rooms had a little square, a foot by foot, peephole. And all the boys were trying to get their nose in to see it. And this time he drank it, but he told this another time, he told Jerry to hit him for not getting on time to the show. He says, "I won't go and work this show unless you pay me for what I did wrong." And and Jerry said, "No, I won't do it." And in the end, Jerry had to whack him. These were the crazy things that Jake did. But all the houses those days, this was in the 90s, all the houses where we just left of WWE, all the houses were packed for Jerry. You know, I'm talking about 3,000, 2,500, 3,000, 4,000.
And of course, Jerry Gray now has a GoFundMe for any fans that want to help him out.
Yeah,
Graham is asking.
Guy's got cancer.
Yeah, he's not doing very well. So search GoFundMe. Any fans that want to help Jerry Gray out, he's a good guy. Graham is asking you, what's the favorite angle that you booked in Puerto Rico?
Favorite angle? There were so many, but the biggest angle that I booked in Puerto Rico was in 1983 for Carlos Colon, WWC, Capital Sports. Okay, Brody and Hanson had broken Carlos's neck, and Carlos was carted out to hospital, and he was put in a neck brace, and he wore this neck brace for 5 months, or 4 to 5 months, and then it came to payback time, and he couldn't find a partner. And one of his biggest enemies since they opened up in 75, this was 83, his biggest enemy since they opened up in 75 was Abdullah. They'd sold out numerous times all over the island and in the Caribbean. So we said he's going to go and get Abdullah for his partner. So he had this place in San Antonio, Texas, a big home, you know, in the millions. And we had a houseboy. Carlos went to the door and knocked. He had to see Abdullah's home. He knocked on the door and he said, "I'd like to talk to Abdullah." And the houseboy went back and came back and he says, "No, Abdullah won't speak to you. Carlos Colon." He said, "I've got money. I'll speak to him." And he went back and he says, "No. Well, no, he didn't have money then. No, I won't speak to him." The next day he came back and he had a suitcase with I don't know, maybe $10,000 in it, you know, stacked from the bank in a flat Halliburton suitcase. And he knocked on the door again and he told him, he said, "I want to talk to Abdullah again." And he said, "I've got money." And he went and seen him and he says, "No. Then when the boy came back and told him no, he opened the suitcase up and he went and told Abdullah the money. And then Abdullah came to the door, grunted and groaned and gave the nod yes. He'd come as his partner and then we built up we did the promos. Abdullah's manager was a Puerto Rican named, he was an announcer, a Spanish announcer
Hugo Savinovich.
For WWE.
Hugo Savinovich, I believe.
Yes. And he was my manager earlier on too when I was there in 80. And Hugo did their promo for Abdullah with a photo of Abdullah behind him. And then Carlos did his videos and that. And of course, Brody sent in and Hanson sent in their promos from wherever they were working in the States. And the match was sent. And this show we did it in, I think it was Hiram Beetham outdoor in show, or a big outdoor show in San Juan. It had about 25,000 people there. It was in the stands and it had 5,000 ringside in seats, or 4,000 and the restaurant stands. And then we had it linked up with Ponce and another, I forget the other show on the south west corner that we used to do for big shows in. We had it linked up. We did about 40,000 people all told, 35 to 40,000 people all told with that show.
Wow. Now, you worked with Invader in IWA when you guys were on the booking team. Did he ever tell you his version of what happened with Brody?
No, I never, mate. No, I actually was a booker with Brody, as I said, in late 83 to 85. And then I left, and that situation happened 23 years ago, 1988. I was already in WWF when that situation happened. And that was never brought up. But I seen the Vice and on all that show and that, Savio talked about it. My friend from up Portland, Maine, Tony Atlas, mentioned it and all that sort of stuff.
Do you think it could have had to do with money that was owed to him? Because we all are aware of the Carlos Colon pace stuff that goes on.
That was part of it, mate. This is third party. I'm quoting third party. Okay? He was owed money. And in 76, when Brody went into New York with Vince Sr., everywhere he went, when he went in, he chopped meat. And you know what I mean? When Brody chopped meat, he chopped meat. His a big boot and that big fist coming down chopping you. And that big boot coming up in your face. He was merciless, but he got over everywhere he went. And he actually worked in Boston against Jose Gonzalez. Invader won there. And he chopped him, he chopped meat there with Invader. And then I heard he was coming back. They owed him big money, and there was talk of him getting, I think they were not going to pay him, but they're going to give him points in the company. You know what I mean? Because they didn't have the money to get out of it, so they're going to give him points in the company. So he was going to make money weekly if the company was doing well.
That makes sense.
So that's what I heard. This was third hand.
Was he a nice guy to you in your dealings with him as a booker?
Yeah, Frank. Yeah, I worked with Frank Travel in Texas. He lived in Brooklyn. I was booking for Joe Blanchard out of San Antonio, and he lived about 18 miles out of 20 miles out of town. You know, he had a big home there, and he worked for me a lot. But Frank would do an angle when we worked at the Junction on Monday nights and shot television in a little studio held 400 or 300, and he would do an angle with us, and then he would go and do an angle with Fritz. You know, Fritz's company was World Championship Wrestling. Then he would do an angle in St. Louis, and then he would go up and do an angle for Vern, AWA, and then if ours come up on the same date as they were wanting to book him for the blow off, he'd go for the biggest money, who would pay off the most. And of course, St. Louis was a big arena. You know, it could do 18,000 people. Vern's arenas, they would do, you know, between 12 and 18,000. Big hockey arenas. Joe's big arena was in San Antonio, which was about, you know, Hemisphere, which is about 14,000 at the time. So he would go, and on a Sunday show, he effed me one time. We were doing good in the valley down in Westlaco, and we were doing 2,500 every month on a Sunday afternoon. And he was booked on a Sunday afternoon there, and of course he went with Fritz or someone else, and that place, we couldn't get it up again. It took about maybe a year before we even got 1,000 people there. It went down to 200 or 100. That was all down the valley. Was all fruit pickers, and they all come over from Mexico.
Okay, I see. Now, Jacques Rougeau wanted me to say hi to you. You may have seen that because I know you watched some of the comments.
Yeah,
Colin here is asking if the Mountie was difficult to work with.
Jock is an old friend. I was wrestling his brother, you know, when I was in Grand Prix, and then they did the Grand Prix, and the Rougeaus did a joint promotion in 84 and 74, and I come back I worked with Raymond. Raymond was just a kid then, and his partner was his brother-in-law. He's married to their sisters. Now, in 82, I met Jock Rosa working for the Fullers in Southeast Championship Wrestling, Ron and Robert Fuller. And then I went to Continental Wrestling, and I met Jock there. And I worked with Jock there, and then I worked with him again for Jared in maybe early 83.
Okay, and we had a question about your time in Memphis too. How did you like Memphis, and any stories about Lord Jonathan Boyd?
Oh yeah, we did great. When Butch left me in Puerto Rico the first time, and that due to his wife saying, "You're coming home, or I'm asking for a divorce," and that's when he went home, and I was trying to get him someone with a down under accent. Now, Jonathan Boyd comes from Australia. I'd met him in New Zealand in the mid 60s, early 60s, because I broke it in 62. And maybe he came to New Zealand in 64, 65. I'd met him then, and then he'd come over here with Norman Charles, who was Murphy the Surfy in Australia, and they formed the Royal Kangaroos, you know, following the original Kangaroos, Al Costello and I forget his, and Heflin, Roy Heflin. The Royal Kangaroos came in and were very big in the South, and then but Norman had left Jonathan, so this was 83. This was now 82. This was 82, and end of 81, and the Butch had left, and I thought of everyone, and I asked Jonathan to come in. So Jonathan shaved his long hair off, which was down to his shoulders, and come and joined the sheep herders. And Jonathan was very good on the mic. He was a nasty talker. And he had, hey, Jonathan, God bless his soul, he had heat with the boys in the dressing room. So he had heat with the fans.
Yeah, that reminds me of
He had real
myself.
heat with the boys. In the ring, when I was working with people, and that they would let me tag out when we were getting the heat up on them. And I went to tag with Jonathan in, they'd pull me away from the corner. Because when Jonathan came in, he was pretty firm and stiff. He beat them up.
Now, Beater Car tips you $5. He says, how did you get on the show Family Matters? And how was your experience with the cast? Did they watch wrestling?
Oh, that was a great mate. The cast was great. Urkel, he was great. The stunts I did, they had a look-alike with Steve and the police, Carl. They had a stunt for them, but the rest of the guys that jumped in the ring, they loved it. As soon as we went for a break from each time shooting, the cast would all jump in the ring and be doing wrestling moves. Oh, pardon me, they'd be doing wrestling moves, mate. They were a great time. We had a great time there, mate. And of course, that actual episode was used, and it's still used on the channels way up in the hundreds. That was used heavily in the 90s and up to 210 on E, Channel E, Channel WE, a lot of channels.
That was one of the top shows of the 90s. I remember even watching that.
Yes.
On another topic, all of our fans always like this. From Your Head to Your Soul is asking any ring rat stories.
Any ring rat stories? Yes, but they're triple X rated.
What that reminds me, I remember when we used to drive together in IWA, there was a wrestler you were telling me that used to ask for girls' tampons that he would put into his beer and mix it around. Who was that?
That was Jonathan. That was John Hunter in Wellington, New Zealand. He was a bodybuilder, and he was part of the sort of so-called mafia we had in the capital city. Jonathan.
Oh boy.
John Hunter. The Hunter family, Hunter brothers, there were three of them, and they were well known. A good criminal record.
Now, I hope your answer is no to this, but Jabberwocky's asking if you ever saw Lanny perform his little trick on himself.
Lanny? No, I never saw him, but that was numerous. That was well known. You know how limber Lanny is. You know, he could move. He was I remember him doing the ballet moves and that. You know, when he worked in the early 80s, when he worked against Hulk, or late 80s, and he was working, you know, sort of doing ballet moves.
Yeah, I heard Virgil did that too. Psycho Sid told me Virgil got fired from Memphis for doing that in the dressing room.
He got fired from Memphis, yeah. Virgil, he was a bragger, but I don't think he could ever get it erect.
Oh boy. Now, Marty Jannetty's told me he's had sex with like 5,000 women. I'm sure you've heard this story that Marty's claiming that he killed somebody now. What do you make of all of that?
Marty must have been off. You know, the post went down a day or so afterwards. Marty goes on binges, as you know. I know Marty, I would say well, but I travel with Marty a lot. Marty's a very likable guy, but when he goes on binges, his Facebook stories maybe 4 years ago, they used to be long and they got very deep with stuff he did. You know what I mean? And a woman died in his house, and he was supposed to be up in the attic about 5 years ago. You heard about that, right?
No, I had no idea. What happened? Other than what
she was found dead in the room. I don't actually know the full story, but that was a court case about that. But he was never fined or tried for that. he was found upstairs. You know what I mean?
Now,
But he wrote so much gaga about different things that, you know, and that I think earlier on the police used to let it go. It was heavy, and that, you know, I couldn't. But you know, when he gets on the binge, you know, one WrestleMania, we're in the hotel where the convention WrestleCon was, and there was a lobby bar, a big lobby with a fountain in the middle and a bar off to the side that was all open to it. Fucking, we were drinking with Marty there, and all of a sudden Marty jumped in the pool, and that with all the fans, you know, WrestleCon, you know how bad that is.
I actually saw Marty
Marty
at
was
the
swimming around
Orlando
in the fountain.
WrestleCon, stumbling drunk on the
Yeah,
grass
he
in
was in
front of
the
the
fountain, and he lay there and passed out in the fountain. I think that was a WrestleMania afternoon.
Okay. Now here's a good question from Colin. Where did the Bushwhacker walk come from?
Well, we developed the only thing that Vince done, and a lot of people ask me this. He gave us the name. We actually met Vince on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and by Friday we got a package. And Butch rings me up and he says, "You know, I got a package here, but I think they sent it to the wrong people. It's got Bushwhackers." And I says to Butch, "Hey, Vince changing our name because he wants to own it for merchandise and all that sort of stuff." Anyhow, he gave us the name, and we used to, as the heels, we used to come to the ring and stamp our feet and all that, go around the ring and come out of the ring and stamp our feet and swing our arms up and go, "Wow!" to sort of scare the fans. Hence the walking. Butch rang me up and he said, "Let's walk to the ring like we were as heels, but we'll stomp all the way to the ring and swing our arm up or march." And of course, I cried back. I says, "My shoulders are fucked." I said, "My shoulder," and he says to me, "Do you want to make money?" So hence the arm swinging and the foot stomping going to the ring came.
Now, this fan says you should come back to Pembroke, Ontario, where you actually wrestled for Great North Wrestling before. And he asked what your favorite tag team you and Butch faced is.
Hey, we had some good tag teams that we ran with. And not only we ran with the Nasty Boys. When they first come in, we had to break them in. They'd never worked. You know, they'd been at Memphis and AWA, but all the good workers had gone. They were there in the late 80s in AWA and Memphis, where all the, you know, I'd say all the indie workers were working for them. You know what I mean? When they came in, they were rough as nails. And we worked with them for a year and a half, and we changed them, and they become workers. And but the only team that Tom Pritchard worked with, a couple of guys, he was a polished worker, Tom Pritchard, of course, and he had a redhead working with him from Florida, who was a great worker. I can't forget. They were called. I can't forget their names. But the tag teams he worked with was in the NWA. What we ran with around was the fabulous ones. Steve, I first worked with in 1980, him and Mike Graham. But then I came back in 83 in Memphis, and we worked with, for 6 months or 8 months, we worked with Stan Lave and Steve Kern. We did all kinds of matches and sold out everywhere with them, with those two. Then we worked with them in Texas. We worked with them in Puerto Rico. We worked with them in Florida. You know, where I booked, I took them with us. You know what I'm saying? You know, not full time. I brought them in because they were homesteading in the Memphis area at the time, in Nashville. And then the second team we worked just like that was the two little guys with big hearts, the fantastic Bobby Fulton and Tommy. What's his last name?
Roger.
Tommy Rogers. God bless his soul. He's dead now. They were smaller guys. Tommy was only 5'6", 5'7". Bobby was 5'9", but they were great guys to work with. 210, both around the 210, 215. But they were, we got them to fight back all the time. And we did great business for Bill Watts. And then when Bill Watts was bought out by NWA Charlotte, and that we worked for there, and we were bought out, and we worked all over the place, from Georgia. We worked Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, Virginia. We worked Arkansas, Mississippi, and what's the state that the New Orleans Superdome in?
Louisiana.
That's Mississippi, isn't it?
That's Louisiana.
Louisiana. We worked all those territories, with the fabulous ones, Louisiana. We worked all those territories with the Fantastics and did great business. That's what we did, about 25 to 30 barbed wire cage matches.
Yeah, you were known for those, which some people might find hard to believe, only knowing you as the Bushwhackers.
You can see those online. If you Google them, the Fantastics with 6-man tags and 4-man tags. And the best match, which got a 5-star for the year, was in the Crockett Cup match, 1986 in the Superdome.
Now for
Bushwhackers against the Fantastics.
I know you were in the Montreal territory. Did you ever witness Mad Dog Vachon in any of his infamous bar fights? He was known as being one of the toughest wrestlers.
Okay, mate. A long story short again, the Vachons are the guys that brought us into Canada. This is our first North American territory. We'd only worked, before that, we'd worked Australia, and we worked Singapore and Asia and Japan. We hadn't been to North America. So here's two boys from down under coming to Montreal. In New Zealand, the bars and restaurants, bars closed at 6, restaurants closed at 8. The boardwalks were empty after 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock. And then here we are in bloody Montreal. Now, we'd worked with the Giant before we come. We'd worked with Killer Kowalski, a big star, selling out all the places across Canada and in Madison Square Garden in the 60s and 70s. Well, all of a sudden we're in this territory where Andre is the top baby face and Killer Kowalski is the top heel. And we worked with Andre in New Zealand in the late 60s, Butcher Me, for over 2 months. So we're in there, and the Vachons brought us in. And of course, the 3 main teams we worked for a year and a half there was the Vachons, the Indians, Billy Two Rivers, and Johnny War Eagle, and who else? And the Italians, Gino Brito and Dino Bravo. Dino was 20 years old then. They were the 3 main teams we worked. And of course, we worked a few times. We did heel matches with Killer Kowalski and Fish Passon.
So did you ever see Mad Dog Vachon in action?
Now I'm going to tell you, we worked against the Vachons, but one night in Quebec City, Morris was 220, hairy, and vicious. If you ever watch his interviews, it was a vicious interview. And he was vicious in the ring. He was unorthodox, worked both sides, just came in like a heel. That's why he's so popular. He worked as a heel, as a baby face. And that's why the fans loved him. He beat people up. And this night, a person got out of hand and come to the rails and swung at him in Quebec City. He grabbed that hand, bit the finger, and ripped all the flesh off. The flesh was hanging off the finger. The fans, and we all saw it. Hey, I wouldn't like to bloody get in the ring. And he used to bring in 2. you know, some of the young guys that come in for their company, he was partners in office. There was Maurice Vachon, Butcher Vachon, and Edward Carpentier. It was a big office. It worked all over Quebec and part of Ontario and some of upper part of the States.
Did
Vermont.
you ever eat at Andre the Giant's restaurant when he had it open when you were in that territory?
No, we never went there to that. But we used to meet Andre in Crescent Street. That was the main street in downtown Montreal. Late at night, he'd say, send a message over, meet us there, and we'd eat with him late at night because we couldn't believe it. All of a sudden, we're in a bloody city where the delicatessens are open till 2 a.m. You could get chicken and a salad, and you could get a bottle of wine. You know, it was a new world to us. Butcher and me were like 2 new kids on the block.
Did you ever witness any of these infamous Andre the Giant drinking stories where he's drinking hundreds of drinks in a sitting?
Hey, I've seen a lot of them, mate. A lot of them. Because in New Zealand, of course, but Andre, a can of beer was 2 sips for Andre. You understand what I'm talking about? And his manager, Frank Valwa, was about 280, 275, 280. He went everywhere with him. He was about 6'2". He was from the same area in France as Andre. And that, okay. Andre and Frank and the Butch and me, we went up to work the Northern Territories of Quebec against Andre, and I think it was either Dominic DiNucci. Dominic DiNucci, the Italian from Pittsburgh, well known, worked in the gardens and worked the big show that we drew 29,000 in Jerry Park in 1973. That broke all records at the time. You know, in the business. Anyhow,
yeah.
I've got to tell
Abdullah fought in that one too, right, in the main event.
I'm going to tell you about that in a minute, because that was a big notorious match, a main event there. Anyhow, a Canadian well-known story. Anyhow, we're coming back from way up the Quebec. I forget the big cities where, you know, we've been on this run with Andre and Dominic, and we're coming back in Andre's car, and that Butcher beer sitting in the back. They bought 72 beer at the start, and they ran out of it halfway back. And so they stopped for another 72 beer. We're in the back. We can't believe, but joking away. And, you know, Andre, and if he fast, you had to get out of the car. You know, he would clear an airplane out. Anyhow, we stopped at this truck stop, and it was I think it was in the school break time. It must have been in the summer somewhere. And there was some young university students there. And me and Butch went into the, Andre stayed in the car first, and we went into the truck stop earlier. It's one of those truck stops with a bar, a breakfast bar too on the other side. And one side was all the truck and the gasoline. You paid for the gasoline. And, you know, it had all the drinks and all that. You know, the roads truck stops. You got what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly.
We have blonde hair, a black beard. So these university students, they pulled up at the same time as we pulled up, and we got out, and here they are yelling at us, "Hey, you fucking tapetes." They're calling us fags in Spanish. Andre got out and heard us. And they got out and went in. They had a Volkswagen. Andre went over to that Volkswagen, and there's quite a few stories about this. The story that one person was still in the car. He turned that Volkswagen over on its side. Unbelievable strength, mate. You know, this was early 83. Andre was about 325 then. When he was in New Zealand, he was only 325, 300 pounds, tall, you know, 69, big afro, tall, great worker. Great. People don't know, but he could do drop kicks. Back in the day when he worked against Don Leo Jonathan, and they did the big ones in Montreal Forum, and they went through to the curfew at midnight. You know, Don Leo could do spring ups. You know, the back spring, lay on his back and spring up, and the giant could drop kick. Unbelievable big man. Don Leo was 320 and 6'8". Unbelievable matches.
Tommy is asking where he can buy your shirt.
By Pro Wrestling Tees. And if you send it to me, I'll sign it for you. Just go to bushwackerluke.com. You can see the shirts there, and it'll take you straight to Pro Wrestling Tees.
Now, you've already answered this, but Cyrus tipped you $5. So he says, any fan reaction stories about licking their heads?
Not really. Hey, I shouldn't say it, but the fanatics, they were fanatics. When we were marching back to the ring or marching back, they would put their heads out for us.
Oh, I saw it. I used to go to the matches.
Square Garden, and then especially in Boston, all those big arenas, they'd be hanging over the rails, you know, lick me. Crazy, huh? Hey, mate, look at 2020, May, June, and July. You think they would do it today?
No, it would be funny to see, though.
They wouldn't even come near us. Someone put a photo of us up on internet recently. It was me bush licking my head. And it had a quotation underneath. The Bushwhackers brought the COVID virus to North America.
There's a guy on here that keeps saying you're gay. You've been married. You've had. I just want to address this because this guy's getting annoying to me. You are not gay.
People, you know, we did that. Hang on a minute, mate. I got to put the volume up for me.
Okay.
Okay, I just put it up. Okay, I've had this said to me numerous times. The first time when we did the hongi for Vince, we started wearing that thing around our neck. It was a Maori thing, like it was called a tiki. I can't explain to you. You have to look it online. A tiki, T-I-K-I. It's a Maori thing, a greeting thing that the Maoris give to you, the Polynesian people in New Zealand. And their meeting was when they met people, they hugged each other and rubbed noses. That was, to close friends. That was a big welcome. Grab and rub noses. We started to do that in WWF, and everyone started yelling out that we were gay. And now here's another one. When Victor Quinones brought me in as booker in the end of 201 to 202, the start of 202, and that Victor Quinones was the booker of IWA, and IWA Dutch Mantel had done a hell of an angle, and they blew it at the end of 201. I was on the shows, and then I came in because Dutch fell out with the office, and I come in and continued the angle on till Dutch come back about a year later. He came back for a year and a half, and then went to TNA. Anyhow, when I came in, and Victor, being a well-known promoter and gay, everyone took me because Victor put in that I came in and he was good friends with me. Victor and me had been friends since 1981. 81 when I first come into working in Puerto Rico, and he worked for the office. You know, he worked for the office then. He hadn't bought in till about 82, 83 when I came back as a booker. But he was working for the office then as a referee and a gopher, running around, helping in that. And so I'd known Victor so that long. We were close friends.
Now, for the Outback Jack stuff, he had a lot of heat backstage. I know Dynamite Kid ribbed him to death. What were your thoughts on Outback Jack? I know Australia and New Zealand are kind of enemies, but...
Over here, Australians and me, we're brothers. We're brothers because we're from down under. Back in New Zealand, we've got a lot of heat. Rugby, which is a major sport, You know, it's not like American football. Rugby, of course, you know how it is. It's played in
I played
Canada.
rugby.
They don't wear any body armor or anything. And the same guys stay on the field for 80 minutes. Anyhow, we have a lot of heat. Australia and New Zealand clash. And, of course, New Zealand have been world champions. We're not actually... We were world champions so many times and back to back. And we lost last year in the world championships. So we got a lot of heat. Australia is in the top 4 in the world. There's 30 countries that play in that. And then in cricket, we're very, back and forth, in cricket. And Australia's, God bless them, and I've got a lot of Australian friends, but if they've done anything and they've got a bit of a name for themselves, if you say something, they come back and say they've done it better. Us Kiwis are going to say that. We're more humble.
So is that why Outback Jack had his heat?
We're more humble, but we love you, and I love you.
So is that why Outback Jack had his heat? Was he just arrogant?
Yeah, he had heat. He used to, he had heat with guys. Just like that football player, Aussie Rules football player, came over with blonde hair, and he was doing a lot of ads for batteries and all that about 10 years ago. He had blonde hair, and he would go, "Whoa!" I don't know whether, and he went on a talk show. They were getting him on the morning talk shows to get him over around the country to use them in movies and all that. And he bragged, he could do anything better. That was the end of him. He bragged too much. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, were you there?
All the boys ribbed him and that, and of course, they cut the crocodile off the back of his jacket. Neidhart and Davy Boy cut the crocodile back in, and they pulled him up right in Connecticut, where Vince lives, and he was staying in, I think it was the Sheridan there, or the Hilton, and he came down to the lobby in no clothes. He was so drugged up, he didn't know he had no clothes on.
Is it true that they rolled them up in a carpet at one point too? Did you ever hear that one?
Yes.
Could you tell us that one?
No, I don't know the full story there, mate. I don't know that. See, he was gone when I came in, mate.
Okay.
But I've met him. He lives in Miami.
I see.
He's a different guy now, that was when he first come in. When you first come in from a place, and then if you're not humble, you put, but I hear he's much different now. He changed a lot. He changed a lot while he was in WWE. But all the boys got on him straight away.
Now, I was talking to you about Piper a few days ago. Could you share some memories of your classic feuds with Piper over the years?
Roddy was the longest known American that I'd known. He was the one that got us into. We were working in Hawaii for about 4 months, and he came over for a big show and that in Hawaii, and he said, we're short of a heel team in Northwest Championship Wrestling. And he got us, and that he called up a promoter from the arena, and then he got us to come over, and he called him up again, and he got us booked in Northwest Championship Wrestling. And that's how and then he wasn't there at the time. He'd left and doing a short stint in Japan or somewhere, and he come back as a single, as a heel, and he turned babyface. And I got my mate Rick Martel to come in, who I knew since he was 15. He's a big Canadian from Quebec City, and that I got him to come in because I knew him very well. And great looking babyface. Great body, great fire. And him and Roddy tagged up, and we worked for over a year. Roddy told me in Portland, Oregon, which was a Saturday night show and televised, we had 21 sellouts in a row.
That's incredible.
Oh, stories of Roddy Piper. Okay, we're in there in Oregon with him, and then the next territory we did, they sent us down. He got us booked. Don Owens got us booked in Crockett, and we didn't know it was the biggest territory in the country at the time. It was out of, North Carolina, Charlotte, and it ran North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia, West Virginia. They hadn't started going nationwide yet. We're down there and we're on Turner Television. And I didn't realize what Turner Television, I didn't realize it was satellite and that. Anyhow, we're down there and there for about 2 months. And then Roddy came in. He came down and that. And of course, they're giving him the big push. They within a week and that, they'd put the tag belts on us, not the world tag belts. That was on Ray Stevens and Jimmy Snuka. They put the pacifiers, the Mid-Atlantic Championship belts on us. And they brought Roddy in and put the TV title on him. Then they put the North American belt on him. Right, we're on the road, we're doing small towns, or we did a TV show. And in South Carolina, the police, they knew when the boys were working in the towns. And they used to wait on the roads when the boys were coming back because they knew the boys had traveled fast. This night, Butch and we were coming back with Roddy driving, I think, and we're coming through, and they say it's 55, 45, 25. These little towns are 100 yards long, or 200 yards long. You go right down to 15, 20 miles an hour, and you're out again. So I went through this town. I don't know, 20 miles out of the town, we get picked up. They said they'd been radioed back. It was about 15 minutes out, 12 minutes out. The cop in the town had radioed another cop, pulled us up, and he put one of us in the car, and he said, "You're going to come back to the town with us." So we have to go back because one of us is in the car. I think it's Roddy or Butch. I can't remember who was driving. So we go back to the town. When we get back to the town, the courthouse, next to the courthouse is there's a house, and we're getting back there, getting out of the car. The judge was getting out of his house in a dressing gown and slippers and walking over to the fucking courthouse. So we have to go in front of the judge right there and then. And of course, the southern place, they're very, very strict there. They find you, they take your license off you. We were only speeding so much, so the fine was $250. And if you don't pay it, then they hold your license till you come back. So if I get caught with driving around with no license on me, I get put in the jail. So we scraped up the $250 between us, and that we'll find. And the judge was doing the paperwork. Now he's sitting at a desk here, 4 feet to his right, 5 feet. There's a window, and that the door's over in front of him to come in to the courthouse. It's over in front of him, or down to the left, or right in front of him. Anyhow, it must be down to the left, but straight down. We walk down an aisle and then to the left and out, and then we come up beside it to go around the front to get to the car. So we come around the side of the courthouse, and we're looking in the window and watching the judge do the paperwork. Butch and Roddy get their John Thomases out. That's English for their penises, and pissed all over the fucking window. They're spraying the window. So the judge would see the water coming out, falling down halfway through the window, and they see their two heads. I was freaking out. I was like, let's go. So we hopped in the car and took off back on the road. And that was one story with Roddy Piper. But there's numerous different stories. Roddy Piper was wild, a lot of fun to be with. I loved the guy. Boy, I went to his funeral, cried and cried and cried. Boy, his funeral, he knew that he was going soon. And he said to Rick Rude, the big boss man, and everyone of it upstairs who was dead, he says he's sitting in the theater talking about himself, and he's got to speed up, and we're watching a big screen, where the priest or the guy is doing the funeral, and they've got a screen there, and he's saying, I'll be meeting upstairs soon to those guys. And he was talking about, it was real. Everyone was crying. It was about 80 people, 70 people there.
And last question before we wrap it up here. I did that promo the other day challenging Cody Rhodes.
Very good, mate. I will give you for energy, I will give you an A+ for over promo, an A+.
The question I have regarding that is Cody Rhodes has already chickened out. He's already actually officially said he's not going to do the match. Does that surprise you at all?
Well, you're not in the company. You know what I mean?
He has an open challenge, though. It's an open challenge to independent wrestlers, but apparently it's not legitimate.
Yeah, he's got his crew in there. God bless him. And I'm going to say this in public. Cody's a great worker. You know, there's in AEW, there's only a handful of good workers there. You know that. The rest of them are all their mates. They bought in. They're independent wrestlers. God bless them. They're all making a good wage. They're on the payroll. And that. But Cody's been putting himself with these guys and going through 2 breaks. And that. These guys are indie wrestlers. And he's going out to the ring and trying to make something of them. You've got to put indie wrestlers with other indie wrestlers and let them beat them in so many minutes to build them up. You know, have some intermediate wrestlers who are, you know, you have the middle guys, the bottom guys, the middle guys, and then you have the main guys. You put the middle guys with those. You don't put the top guys who've never been seen before, because he's going through 2 brackets with these guys that have never been seen, and trying to get them over. They're doing false finishes on him, which is he's losing value.
I agree, but I also think he's a coward for not fighting a real wrestler. He'd rather fight those bums just because whatever. But I agree, he is losing value by fighting the bums.
Yeah, I'm looking at this as a booker, mate. You know what I mean? Not as a fan. I'm looking at it as a business side of you, business side. He needs to, you know, he's only got so much good. The trouble is, he's got, you know, the company has only got a handful of good wrestlers. A handful.
I agree. And we were going to close up, but Victor just tipped you $10, so I know you're not going to mind answering his question. He had a question about how was wrestling demolition, and do you think they should be inducted in the Hall of Fame? Thanks for the memories.
Hey, both of them, Bill. Smash? What's his name again?
Barry Darso and Bill Eadie.
Bill and who?
Bill and Barry Darso.
Yeah, Bill and Barry. I know Barry since the Crockett's. He was a Russian there. And I know Bill. I worked against Bill. That was Barry. He came in later when I was in the Crockett's. But I worked against Bill and Paul, I forget his name, in 1981 when I was there for the Crockett's in 81. He was the masked, I forget what is, the masked superstar. I've been Bill's friend of him since then. Beautiful guy. These 2 are good guys, but Bill sued Vince. He had a big lawsuit against Vince over merchandise and television rights, and that suit went on for years. And that, you know, Vince is an elephant. He's got a great memory, but they really deserve to get in. And to all you fans out there, a lot of guys who deserve to get in, you don't know the backswing on them about, you know, they're taking Vince to court and all, like Jesse Ventura. You know, Vince used Jesse again, you know, and all that sort of stuff because he had to. Jesse became the governor of California, of Minnesota. But there's quite a few who should be in there, but due to some problems that the public don't know about, they're not going to be inducted.
Very good. Thanks for answering that question. And is there anything you would like to plug to wrap this up? You already mentioned we can buy this shirt.
Go to bushwackerluke.net or .com, and there's photos there. There's belts, and there's 215 Hall of Fame rings there. You can look at them and buy them right off the site. And I appreciate all your fans out there who've come on. I've been doing this since 1962, traveling the world since '66, and I appreciate everyone in every country for being fans of us as the sheep herders and of course the bushwhackers. And I preferred being The Bushwhackers made a lot of money as baby faces, but down in my heart, I'm a heel.
Can
Just
you
like
end
you.
this by just doing an in-character promo telling Cody he should stop ducking me and accept my challenge? Just 10 or 15 seconds as Bushwhacker Luke.
Whoa, Cody Rhodes. Mate, what's wrong with you, brother? You've got to take this challenge. It's going to put you right up on the pedestal again. Hey, this guy worked for me, and it will work for me for a year in Puerto Rico. He's a great worker. And if you bring him in, it'll be a big noise for your company. Go for it, mate. That's all I have to say.